Newsong, LA. Over the next few weeks, we wanted to highlight some of our teachers at our church. We know that at the beginning of this pandemic, they have literally had to take their classroom environment and flip it in a matter of 48 hours. This week we have two teachers, and I wanted them to introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are and how this season has impacted their teaching.
My name is Janee and school is particularly being even more intentional. I think we're pretty progressive in our what we do to empower and support students in their identity and social emotional supports and activism. In my actual class, I really try and make a lot of my projects and units about justice.
I'm Jessi Johnson. I teach at the University of Southern California, so USC, but I'm a very proud UCLA grad. Go Bruins, no matter what. I teach advanced writing and rhetoric for both undergrads and graduate students. So writing just equates to three things: truth, voice, and beauty. That's writing. And truth, voice, and beauty can take any form. They don't just have to be words on paper. So that means writing can take any form. So I love when my students realize that writing means truth, voice, and beauty, and truth, voice, and beauty can be dance. Truth, voice, and beauty can be a movie. It can be a podcast. It can be a song. It can be any expression. And it doesn't have to literally mean words on paper. And I love when they utilize that and give me these projects and to show how beautiful and diverse writing can be.
What's your favorite thing about being a teacher?
It's really just the relationship and connection with students and families that I find so important.
So I really love bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and anti-racism practices into the classroom. And I especially love it because it makes students realize that their value and their agency comes first. When we center diversity, equity, inclusion, students know that they belong, that they are valued, that they are worthy, and that's one of my favorite things about teaching.
What impact has the COVID-19 pandemic had on your teaching and on your students?
I definitely prefer in-person teaching. I think what we do to empower and support students in their identity and social emotional supports and activism. And then in my actual class, I really try and make a lot of my projects and units about justice. First unit is about food deserts in Los Angeles and looking at data and communities that have obviously a lot fewer resources and what that looks like for diabetes and obesity rates and what we can do about that. And we look at climate change and how to build sustainable communities from a science perspective.
So COVID, as a lot of people have talked about, has really made clearer some deep inequities. And so as a teacher and as a school, we have to adapt to those inequities, but also dismantle them. So some examples are things like who has access to technology, who can have their videos on, who has the bandwidth to on or to have a background, who has time to do assignments, who's in a safe home where they can focus on school. How are students of color responding to the world right now, and how is that affecting their mental health and their ability to learn? Ideas about diversity that are already really hard to talk about are even harder without personal connection, without seeing each other. And that's been a huge challenge when it comes to teaching during COVID, actually. And it's not something that gets talked about a lot.
How has God blessed and strengthened you and your students during this time?
We had a really great opportunity to be immediately supportive of our student and family population. And we had a lot of councils. We held racial affinity groups. So the Black students could have a really safe and brave space to kind of find solace in one another. And then we did some multicultural councils to try to hold space for everything that was happening. And so that I just felt like it was cool to see that come together. And God, for me, was really working because that is such a huge passion area.
One blessing is how creative students have become and how creative we can now allow them to be in many ways. And so it's been awesome to see their creativity really shine through because they understand technology usually a lot better than their teachers do. Another blessing has really been me learning to let down barriers between me and my students. So like I said, building trust has been challenging. So I've had to adapt. So I have set up a separate telephone number and I've given it to all my students, and they can text me or call me whenever they want. And they do. They text me and call me all the time. But the blessing is in letting down my barriers, I have also learned to be more vulnerable. It's different because they're in college, and you know, a lot of my students are 21 years old. So it's easier for me to be really deeply vulnerable with them because they're not, you know, 10 years old. So I can say, hey, I'm struggling right now. My hair is a mess. I'm depressed today. I can really talk about my vulnerabilities with them. And I think God has honored that vulnerability in the same way he honors when we're vulnerable with him. Because I've seen students really open up to me when I've become vulnerable. They've really taken the opportunity to hear my vulnerabilities and respond with kindness. And it really reminds me of the way God responds to us when we're vulnerable with him. And it's also encouraged them to be vulnerable with each other. And so we've set up group discussion boards that have nothing to do with assignments. And all it says is, how are you? And they will write and write and write, and they'll respond to each other. And I'll write in there too. Here's how I am today. You know, today's okay, actually. I actually had a good day, or today was really sucky. So this time has really blessed me with the knowledge of how precious it is to be vulnerable.
What encouragement or tips would you give to parents and students at this time?
An encouragement I would have for college students or for students in general. I don't know if you know this, but colleges cannot legally require you to have your camera on. They cannot require you to do that because it is a matter of equity and equality. Some students don't own cameras. Some students don't want teachers or other people to see their home life. Lectures are recorded, their faces recorded. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't, you know, there's all sorts of reasons. An encouragement I would have for college students or for students in general, sucking at something, just sucking at it, is the first step to being good at it. So it's okay if you suck at science, and it's okay. I have so many students who come in because my class is required, they can't get out of it, and they feel at least that they suck at writing and they hate it. Sucking at something is the first step to being good at something.
As all parents would, I'm sure, experience, there's ups and downs. We're going to do the best we can getting through stuff, but then I know I'm going to leave stuff behind. Like, I'm just not going to get to everything with my kids. But I really do feel like just the social emotional parts right now for kids, for my kids too, is so important. Just be human, I think, and have connection. I think that is so important during this, like, you know, global pandemic.
What encouragement or tips would you give to other teachers at this time?
Encouragement I have for teachers is, you are doing a great job. Seriously, like, just one teacher to another. I know how hard it is. Online teaching totally sucks sometimes, but you are doing it. You totally adapted. You are still there for your students. You picked up so much weight. You're still doing everything at home. You figured out Zoom. You adapted your pedagogy to be completely online. Some people have to study for years to build an online school, and you did it in months or weeks. And your students still like you. You're doing a great job.
We as a church want to continue to be there for you during this time. How can we support and pray for you as you go back to school?
On a digital platform, have really strong relationships that I can with them, because I think teaching really starts with a relationship, and that's when they're most open to learn and explore and grow as people. And so that's like the foundation of my teaching, and so is relationships. So just that we would find really authentic connection points.
My college students text me a lot because I gave them a phone number that they can text and call me at. So giving me strength with, you know, like 15, 20-year-old text messages. A lot of them text me because something serious is going on at home. They'll text me in the middle of the night, or they'll call me because their whole lives, we teach our children, when something is wrong, tell an adult. Someone is bullying you, tell an adult. And my students are now doing exactly what we taught them. something is wrong. So they are telling an adult, but that adult is me. And sometimes I don't have the literal ability to help them. And sometimes their issues are very serious, and that really breaks my heart. So just praying for their struggles, but also praying that I know how to help, and at least praying that I know the right words to say when they're struggling. I would also ask for prayer over having difficult conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that is not something we can ignore, and silence is not an option. It's got to come up in class, and that's going to be awkward and uncomfortable sometimes. So please pray over those conversations, because there's a lot at the institution of colleges that are still actively against diversity, equity, inclusion. So praying for hearts to be open to those things and praying over those conversations.